The fluorescent lights of Romano's restaurant hummed their usual tired song as I scrubbed the same spot on the marble counter for the third time. My hands trembled, not from exhaustion, though God knows I was drowning in it, but from the small plastic stick burning a hole in my apron pocket. 2 pink lines. 2 impossible, terrifying, life-altering pink lines that I'd stared at in the employee bathroom 20 minutes ago, my reflection in that cracked mirror looking like a ghost of the girl I used to be. The restaurant's kitchen clattered behind me, steel against steel. Chef Marco barking orders in rapid Italian that I'd learned to tune out over the past 8 months of working here. The scent of garlic and expensive wine mixed with my nausea, making my stomach roll dangerously. I pressed my palm against the cool marble, steadying myself, praying I wouldn't vomit right here in the dining room where Manhattan's elite came to spend more on a single meal than I made in a week. "Table 7 needs water," Sandra hissed as she breezed past me, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She was one of the real servers, the ones who got tips and recognition. I was just the girl who cleaned, who refilled, who stayed invisible in my black uniform that had seen better days. "And don't just stand there like a statue, Emily. Mr. Castellano's party is arriving in 10 minutes. Mr. Castellano." Even his name sent a chill down my spine, though I'd never met him. The owner kept the private dining room on the 3rd floor reserved for him every Friday night, a space I'd only glimpsed through half-open doors, all dark wood and crimson velvet, like something out of a Gothic novel. The other girls whispered about him in the break room, about his business, about the men in dark suits who swept the room before he arrived, about the way the owner himself trembled when taking Castellano's reservation. I grabbed the water pitcher with shaking hands, the pregnancy test still a physical weight against my hip. 3 months. I'd been so stupid, so desperate, so alone. Jake had seemed like salvation when I'd met him at that downtown bar, his smile promising everything my dead-end life lacked. He'd told me he worked in import-export, had money to burn, treated me like I mattered for exactly 6 weeks before disappearing without a trace, leaving me with nothing but a phone number that went straight to voicemail and a growing secret I couldn't afford. The dining room's atmosphere shifted suddenly, like the air pressure dropping before a storm. Conversations died mid-sentence. Silverware stopped clinking. I looked up from pouring water at table 7 to see why the entire restaurant had fallen silent. He stood in the entrance like darkness made flesh. I'd never seen someone command a room simply by existing. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with shoulders that filled out his black suit, in a way that suggested power coiled beneath expensive fabric. His hair was dark, almost black, styled back from a face that could have been carved from marble except for the very human danger in his eyes. Those eyes swept the room with the precision of a predator cataloging prey, missing nothing, calculating everything. 2 men flanked him, earpieces visible, hands near their jackets in a way that made my mouth go dry. Another man walked ahead, already moving toward the private elevator that led to the 3rd floor. This wasn't a businessman. This was exactly what the whispered rumors suggested, something darker, more dangerous, operating in shadows that the law couldn't quite reach. This was Castellano. Our eyes met for exactly 2 seconds. 2 seconds where I forgot to breathe. Forgot the pregnancy test in my pocket. Forgot everything except the intensity of that gaze. It wasn't sexual. Or maybe it was, buried under layers of assessment and cold calculation. He looked at me like he could see through skin and bone to catalog my secrets. And then his attention moved on, dismissing me as thoroughly as if I'd ceased to exist. I should have felt relieved. Instead, something cold settled in my chest. "Emily," Sandra's urgent whisper snapped me back. "Stop gawking and get back to work. Jesus, you look like you've seen a ghost." I had, or maybe a devil. I wasn't sure which was more accurate. The restaurant slowly came back to life as Castellano disappeared into the elevator with his entourage, but the atmosphere remained charged, electric. I returned to my station, mechanically refilling water glasses and clearing plates, trying to ignore the way my hands still shook. 2 hours passed in a blur of monotonous tasks. My feet ached in my cheap shoes. The nausea came in waves, forcing me to breathe through my mouth and pray I'd make it through the shift. At 9:30, Sandra told me to clean the 3rd floor restroom, the private one near Castellano's dining room, since the regular cleaning crew had called in sick. "Just be quiet about it," she warned. In and out. Don't disturb them. The elevator ride to the 3rd floor felt like ascending to another world. Where the main dining room was all bright elegance, this level breathed old money and older secrets. Thick carpets muffled sound. Oil paintings worth more than my life-decorated burgundy walls. The hallway was empty, but I could hear low male voices behind the heavy door of the private dining room, speaking in Italian too rapid for my limited understanding. The restroom was predictably immaculate, all black marble and gold fixtures. I went through the motions mechanically, wiping counters, restocking towels, checking supplies. My reflection caught me again in the floor-to-ceiling mirror, and I barely recognized myself. When had I become this pale, hollow-eyed creature? When had defeat become so obvious in the slope of my shoulders? The pregnancy test felt heavier with each passing minute. I needed to throw it away, but not here. Not where someone might find it and somehow connect it to me. Paranoid, maybe, but after 8 months of barely surviving in this city, paranoia felt like common sense. I was gathering my cleaning supplies when footsteps echoed in the hallway. Heavy, purposeful, multiple sets, male voices speaking in low tones. My heart kicked into overdrive. They were coming this way. The restroom door opened before I could even think about hiding. A man in a dark suit, one of Castellano's guards, froze when he saw me. His hand went to his jacket instinctively, and for one terrifying moment, I thought I was about to die in a bathroom that cost more than my entire apartment. "What are you doing here?" His accent was thick, his tone suggesting my presence was somewhere between an inconvenience and a threat. "Cleaning," I managed, holding up my supplies like a shield. "I'm sorry. I was told to." "Who told you to be here?" Another voice. Darker. More dangerous. Castellano stepped into view behind his guard, and the bathroom suddenly felt impossibly small. He was even more imposing up close, all sharp angles and controlled violence. The scent of his cologne reached me, something expensive and masculine that made my already unstable stomach flip. "The manager," I whispered. "Sandra told me to clean up here. I'm sorry, I'll go." I moved to leave, but the guard blocked my path. Castellano's eyes, dark and unreadable, fixed on me with that same unsettling intensity from earlier. He looked at me like I was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve, and I hated how that gaze made me feel. Exposed, vulnerable, like standing naked in a spotlight. "You're the girl from downstairs," he said. Not a question. His English was perfect, barely touched by an accent, which somehow made him more terrifying. "The one who cleans." "Yes, sir." My voice came out smaller than I intended. He studied me for a long moment, and I could feel my pulse hammering in my throat. Then his gaze dropped, just for a second, to where my hand had instinctively pressed against my apron pocket, the pocket with the test. No. No, he couldn't possibly. "What's your name?" "Emily. Emily Bennett." "How long have you worked here?" "Emily Bennett." 8 months. Why was he asking me this? Why was I still standing here instead of being dismissed? Something shifted in his expression, too subtle to name. "You look unwell." "I'm fine." The lie was automatic. "Just tired." "Tired," he repeated, like the word was foreign. His gaze hadn't left my face, reading every micro-expression, every nervous swallow. "When did you last eat?" The question was so unexpected that I answered honestly, "This morning." A lie. I'd had coffee, nothing more. Food cost money I didn't have, and what little I'd managed to stomach lately came back up within the hour anyway. Castellano's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He pulled out his phone, one of several I could see in his jacket, and made a quick call in Italian. I caught words I recognized. "Food, now. 3rd floor. Sir, I really should get back to work." "Sit down." It wasn't a request. The guard pulled out one of the velvet chairs near the lounge area of the bathroom, because of course this bathroom had a lounge area, and I found myself sinking into it before my brain caught up with my body's instinct to obey. Castellano dismissed the guard with a subtle gesture, and suddenly we were alone. Every nerve in my body screamed danger, but I was too exhausted, too overwhelmed, too pregnant to do anything but sit there like a rabbit caught in a trap. He leaned against the marble counter, arms crossed, studying me with that unnerving focus. "You're afraid of me?" "No." Another lie. "Smart girl. You should be." There was no threat in his voice, just statement of fact. "But I'm not going to hurt you. Breathe." I hadn't realized I'd been holding my breath. I released it shakily, my hands twisting in my lap. The pregnancy test felt like it was glowing in my pocket, announcing itself, betraying me. "Why are you working yourself to exhaustion?" he asked quietly. "No family? No one taking care of you?" The unexpected gentleness in his tone did something dangerous. It made my eyes burn with tears I couldn't afford to shed. "I take care of myself." Clearly not very well. Before I could respond, a soft knock sounded. The guard entered with a tray, actual silver, laden with food that smelled divine and made my traitorous stomach growl audibly. Pasta in cream sauce, fresh bread, fruit, water. He set it on the small table beside me and left without a word. "Eat," Castellano commanded. "I can't accept." "You can. And you will." His tone left no room for argument. "Consider it an employee benefit." I stared at the food, at this strange, dangerous man who just ordered dinner for a cleaning girl he didn't know, and felt the careful walls I'd built around myself start to crack. This was wrong. Men like him didn't do kindness without expecting something in return. Every instinct screamed trap, manipulation, danger. But I was so hungry, so tired, so alone. My hand reached for the fork before I could stop myself. The first bite of pasta exploded across my taste buds, and I had to close my eyes against the wave of sensation. When had food last tasted like this? When had I last felt anything but numbness? Castellano watched me eat in silence, and somehow that was worse than if he'd been talking. I could feel his eyes cataloging every detail. The way my hands shook slightly, the desperate speed of my eating despite trying to maintain dignity. The dark circles I knew shadowed my eyes. I was halfway through the plate when nausea hit me like a freight train. I dropped my fork, pressing my hand to my mouth, fighting the urge to vomit up the first decent meal I'd had in days. "Bathrooms behind you," Castellano said calmly, like watching girls nearly throw up, was an everyday occurrence for him. I barely made it to the toilet before losing the battle, my body rejecting the food as violently as it had craved it. Mortification burned through me, worse than the physical sickness. I could hear him moving in the outer room, water running, and when I finally emerged, pale, shaking, utterly humiliated, he handed me a damp towel without comment. "Thank you," I whispered, wanting to die. "How far along are you?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I froze, the towel pressed to my face, my entire world narrowing to those 5 words. "I don't..." "What? I have 3 sisters," he said quietly, still leaning against that marble counter like we were discussing the weather. "I've seen enough morning sickness to recognize it." "How far along?" My mind raced through lies, denials, anything to escape this moment. But something in his face, not kindness exactly, but a strange kind of understanding, made the truth fall from my lips like a confession. 3 months, maybe a little more, I'm not sure. My voice broke. "I only found out today." The silence stretched between us, heavy with implications. His dark eyes studied my face with renewed intensity, and I watched his brilliant mind work through calculations, possibilities, probabilities. "The father?" he asked finally. "Gone." The word tasted bitter. He disappeared 2 months ago. I don't even know his real name. Something dangerous flashed across Castellano's face. Anger, perhaps, or recognition of a pattern he'd seen before. "Did he work for someone?" He said import-export, but I trailed off, suddenly understanding what he was really asking. "I don't know. Maybe. Probably." A horrible thought occurred to me. "Why? Do you think you might know him?" "Describe him." I did. Jake's sandy hair, his charming smile, the tattoo on his left wrist of a serpent wrapped around a cross. With each detail, I watched Castellano's expression grow darker, more controlled, more deadly. "Jake Morrison," he said finally, and it wasn't a question. My heart stopped. "You know him." Past tense, deliberate. "He worked for someone who owed me money. He stole from both of us and ran. Castellano's voice was perfectly level, but I heard the violence underneath. I found him 3 weeks ago. The air left my lungs. Found him? He won't be troubling anyone again. The implication hung in the air like smoke, suffocating and undeniable. Jake was dead. The father of my child was dead, killed by the man standing in front of me, and I should have been horrified, should have been screaming, should have been anything except feeling a strange, guilty relief. I see, I managed. Castellano pushed off the counter, moving closer with the fluid grace of a predator. He stopped just within my personal space, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. Close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, see the fine details of his face, a small scar near his left eye, the precise line of his jaw, the intelligence and danger burning in those dark depths. This child, he said softly, his voice dropping to something intimate and terrifying. You're going to keep it? I don't know. I can't afford, I don't have... The words tumbled out in a rush of panic and exhaustion. I can barely afford rent. I'm sleeping on a friend's couch because I lost my apartment last month. I have nothing. I am nothing. His hand moved, and I flinched instinctively, but he simply reached into his jacket, making sure I could see the movement, see that he wasn't drawing the weapon I knew must be there, and pulled out a business card. He pressed it into my palm, his fingers warm against my cold skin. Tomorrow, he said, 10 in the morning. This address. There are things we need to discuss. I have work. I'll arrange it. Of course he would. Men like Castellano arranged everything. Don't be late, Emily Bennett. He turned toward the door, and panic seized me. Wait. Why? Why are you doing this? Castellano looked back over his shoulder, and for just a moment, something raw and almost human flickered across his face. Jake Morrison stole from me. He took money, products, and information that cost me considerably to recover. By my calculation, he died owing me approximately $2 million in damages and restitution. My knees went weak. $2 million. An impossible, astronomical sum. His debts, Castellano continued, his voice soft and dangerous, typically transfer to his estate, to his family. His eyes dropped deliberately to my stomach. To his child. No. The word came out as a whisper. You can't. That's not, but I'm a reasonable man, Emily. He smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. Charming and cold and absolutely merciless. We'll discuss terms tomorrow. I'm sure we can come to an arrangement. He left, his guard following, the door closing behind them with a soft click that sounded like a prison cell locking. I stood there in that opulent bathroom, his business card clutched in my shaking hand, the pregnancy test still hidden in my pocket, and understood with perfect, crystalline clarity that my life had just changed irrevocably. I'd walked into a trap I hadn't even known was being set, and the worst part, the absolutely terrifying part, was that when Castellano had looked at me with those dark, dangerous eyes, when his hand had brushed mine passing that card, something in me had responded. Something desperate and broken and utterly foolish had leaned toward his strength like a moth toward flame. I looked down at the business card, Marco Castellano, with an address in Manhattan's most exclusive district and a phone number that felt like a hotline to hell. Tomorrow morning I would walk into the fire. I didn't sleep. How could I? I lay on Jessica's lumpy couch in her studio apartment in Queens, staring at the water-stained ceiling while sirens wailed outside, and my mind replayed every moment of that bathroom encounter on an endless, torturous loop. Marco Castellano, mafia boss, the man who'd killed my baby's father. And somehow, impossibly, that wasn't even the most terrifying part of last night. The most terrifying part was that I was going to meet him. In 6 hours. At an address that Google Maps showed as a luxury high-rise overlooking Central Park. The kind of building where doormen wore uniforms nicer than anything in my closet. Jessica's alarm went off at 7. I heard her stumble to the bathroom, the shower running, her off-key humming of some pop song. She worked as a paralegal downtown, had her life together in ways I could only dream about. When she emerged in her towel, she found me still on the couch, fully dressed in my only decent outfit. Black pants with a small stain I'd tried to hide, and a gray blouse that hung a little looser than it had 3 months ago. Jesus, Em, Did you sleep in those clothes? She poured coffee, the smell making my stomach lurch. You look like death. Couldn't sleep. I checked my phone. 8:15. I have an appointment this morning. Appointment? With who? Jessica's eyes narrowed with concern. Is this about, I'd told her about the pregnancy test last night when I'd stumbled in near midnight, shaking and incoherent. She'd held me while I cried, promising everything would be okay, even though we both knew it wouldn't be. Sort of. I stood, grabbing my jacket. I'll explain later. I have to go, Jess. I'll be fine. Another lie in an increasingly long list. The subway ride into Manhattan gave me too much time to think. I stood pressed between a businessman in an expensive suit and a woman with 3 children, my hand wrapped around the pole, watching the darkness blur past the windows. At each stop, I considered getting off, running, disappearing into the city's anonymous masses. But where would I run? I had $43 in my bank account. No family. My parents had died in a car crash when I was 19, leaving me with nothing but grief and student debt. No real friends except Jessica. No safety net, no backup plan. No future that didn't involve me and a baby starving slowly in some forgotten corner of this merciless city. And Castellano's words echoed in my mind. His debts transfer to his child. $2 million. It might as well have been $2 billion. An impossible, crushing weight that would destroy any chance my baby had at life before they even took their first breath. Unless I made an arrangement. The address led me to exactly the kind of building I'd expected. All glass and steel and quiet wealth. The doorman, an older man with kind eyes and military posture, stopped me at the entrance. I'm here to see Marco Castellano, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He's expecting me. Emily Bennett. The doorman's expression shifted subtly, a flicker of surprise followed by professional neutrality. He picked up a phone, spoke quietly, then nodded. Penthouse level. The elevator requires a key card. I'll send you up. The elevator was mirrored on all sides, forcing me to confront my reflection from every angle. I looked exactly like what I was, a terrified girl playing dress-up, trying to convince the world she belonged in spaces like this. My hair, usually wild, was pulled back in a neat ponytail. I'd covered the dark circles under my eyes with drugstore makeup Jessica had lent me, but no amount of concealer could hide the fear in my eyes or the slight tremor in my hands. The elevator opened directly into a penthouse foyer, and I stepped out into another world. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park, the morning sun turning the autumn leaves into flames of gold and crimson. The space was massive, open-concept living with furniture that looked like art installations. A kitchen with marble counters and appliances that probably cost more than I'd earned in my entire life. Everything was done in shades of black, gray and cream, masculine and powerful and utterly intimidating. Miss Bennett. The voice came from my left. One of Castellano's guards, the same one from last night, stood near a hallway. This way. He led me through the penthouse to an office that somehow managed to be even more imposing than the rest of the space. Dark wood shelves lined with leather-bound books, a massive desk with multiple monitors showing what looked like security feeds and financial data, more windows offering views that made my breath catch, and Castellano, standing with his back to me, phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Italian that sounded like controlled fury. He wore dark slacks and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms that were corded with muscle and marked with scars, evidence of a life lived dangerously. His hair was slightly mussed, like he'd been running his hands through it, and for just a moment, he looked almost human, almost approachable. Then he turned, and those dark eyes pinned me in place, and I remembered exactly what he was. I'll call you back, he said into the phone, switching seamlessly to English. His gaze traveled over me, assessing, calculating. You came. You said to. I hated how small my voice sounded. You said we needed to discuss terms, so I did. He gestured to one of the leather chairs facing his desk. Sit. I sat, perched on the edge like a bird ready to flee. Castellano moved around the desk with that fluid grace, settling into his chair with the casual confidence of a man who owned everything in his line of sight. He steepled his fingers, studying me over them. "Have you eaten?" The question threw me. "What?" "Breakfast. Have you had any?" No, I couldn't. The nausea, the fear, the impossibility of everything. "I'm fine." His jaw tightened. Without breaking eye contact, he pressed a button on his desk phone. "Antonio." "Breakfast, the usual, but add fruit and ginger tea." He paused. "And crackers." "Sir, I really don't need—" "The baby does." His tone left no room for argument. "You're thin, pale, clearly malnourished. Whatever arrangement we come to, it begins with you taking care of yourself." Arrangement. There was that word again, loaded with implications I was terrified to examine. What kind of arrangement are we talking about? Castellano leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking softly. "Let me be clear about several facts, Emily. Jake Morrison was a low-level courier who got greedy. He stole product worth $500,000, along with information that compromised several of my business operations. In cleaning up his mess, I lost money, contacts, and time. By any accounting, he died owing me far more than $2 million. Each word landed like a stone, building a wall of debt around me. I felt my chest tighten, my breathing grow shallow. I didn't know. I didn't know anything about what he did. "I believe you." Something in his expression softened fractionally. "You were a mark, Emily, a convenient cover. He used you to appear legitimate, domestic, unthreatening. The moment he needed to run, he disappeared without a second thought." The words hurt more than they should have. I'd known Jake had been using me, some part of me had always known. But hearing it stated so baldly made me feel even more pathetic. "So what do you want from me? I can't pay you back. I have nothing." "Not nothing." His eyes dropped briefly to my stomach. "You have something very valuable, the child of a man who owed me a considerable debt." My hands instinctively covered my stomach, protective. "You can't have my baby." "I don't want your baby, Emily." His voice was surprisingly gentle. "I want to protect them. And you." I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. "Protect us?" Jake's theft didn't just affect me. He also stole from the Vitale family, my competitors, for lack of a better word. They don't know he's dead yet, but when they find out, they'll come looking for compensation. And when they discover he left behind a pregnant girlfriend, he let the implication hang in the air, dark and threatening. My blood ran cold. They'd come after me, after the baby. Yes. No sugarcoating, no false comfort, just brutal honesty. They'd use you to send a message, to hurt me since I'm the one who found Jake first, to recover their losses through whatever means necessary. The room spun slightly. I gripped the arms of the chair, fighting against panic. So I'm dead anyway. The baby's dead. There's no way out. There is one way. Castellano leaned forward, his intensity magnetic and terrifying. "You become mine." The words hung between us, loaded with meaning I couldn't fully parse. "What?" "Officially, publicly, undeniably mine. Under my protection. In my world, that means untouchable. The Vitales wouldn't dare touch what belongs to me. It would start a war they can't afford. Belongs to you," I repeated, tasting the words. They should have revolted me, should have sent me running from this room, this building, this impossible situation, but instead, I felt a strange pull, like gravity shifting beneath my feet. "What exactly does that mean?" A knock at the door interrupted us. Antonio entered with a tray, setting it on the desk between us. Toast, eggs, fruit perfectly arranged, a pot of tea that smelled like ginger and honey. He left without a word, and Castellano pushed the tray toward me. "Eat while we talk." My stomach growled traitorously. I picked up a piece of toast, nibbling it cautiously, while Castellano outlined his proposal in a voice that could have been discussing a business merger rather than my entire future. "You'll move into this building, a different unit, appropriate for a woman in your situation. I'll handle rent, utilities, groceries, medical care, everything you need for yourself and the child." He ticked items off like a shopping list. "You'll have security, discreet but constant. No one will harm you or threaten you. In return, you'll be seen with me publicly, dinners, Events. Enough appearances to establish that you're under my protection. I swallowed the toast with difficulty. You want me to pretend to be your... What? Girlfriend? Girlfriend, companion, partner. He waved a hand dismissively. The specifics don't matter. What matters is perception. If people believe you're mine, you're safe. And the baby? The question came out barely above a whisper. What happens when they're born? Something flickered across his face. An emotion too complex to name. The child will be raised safely, with every advantage money can provide. Education, security, opportunity. They'll want for nothing. It sounded like a fairy tale, a dark, twisted fairy tale, where the monster became the prince, and the princess was really just a terrified girl with no other options. What do you get out of this? Castellano was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. I told you I have 3 sisters. What I didn't mention is that I also had a brother. Younger, reckless, thought he was invincible. He got a girl pregnant, then got himself killed in a stupid, avoidable confrontation. The girl was so scared of my family, of what we are, that she ran. Disappeared completely. I've spent 5 years looking for her. For my nephew or niece. His voice went flat, emotionless. I never found them. Understanding crashed over me. This wasn't about debt or business or even protection. This was about guilt, about redemption, about a second chance at something he'd lost. So I'm a replacement, I said quietly. For the family you couldn't save. No. His eyes snapped to mine, fierce and certain. You're someone I can save. Someone I will save, if you let me. The tea warmed my hands, the ginger settling my nausea. I looked at this man, this dangerous, powerful, terrifying man, and saw something I hadn't expected. Not kindness, exactly, but something close to it. A protection born of past failures and present determination. And I looked at my other options. Homelessness, starvation, death at the hands of people hunting Jake's debts. I looked at the tiny life growing inside me, innocent and unaware of the impossible situation they'd been born into. If I say yes, I began carefully. What are the rules? What do you expect from me? Cooperation. You attend events when asked, play your part convincingly. You accept security. No ditching your guards. No trying to prove your independence at the cost of safety. You take care of yourself and the baby. And, he hesitated, something almost vulnerable crossing his features. You're honest with me. No lies, no games. I've had enough of that. And you? I pressed. What are your rules? I protect you. I provide for you. I don't ask questions about your past. And you don't ask questions about my business. His voice hardened slightly. You'll see things, hear things. You forget them immediately. What happens in my world stays in my world. A gilded cage. That's what he was offering. A beautiful, luxurious prison where I'd be safe, but never truly free. Where I'd be possessed, protected, provided for, but always under his control. I should have said no, should have run, should have chosen any other path. But there were no other paths. Not really. Not for a pregnant, broke, hunted girl with nowhere left to turn. Okay, I whispered. I'll do it. Castellano's expression shifted, satisfaction mixed with something darker, more possessive. He pulled out his phone, made a quick call in Italian, then stood and moved around the desk. He offered me his hand, and I stared at it for a moment before placing my smaller, trembling hand in his. His grip was warm, firm, utterly consuming. Welcome to my world, Emily Bennett, he said softly, dangerously. You're mine now, and I protect what's mine. The apartment Marco arranged for me was on the 15th floor of the same building, 3 levels below his penthouse. When Antonio led me to it that afternoon, my few belongings already collected from Jessica's couch by people I'd never met, I stood in the doorway and forgot how to breathe. It was bigger than anywhere I'd ever lived. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, letting in streams of golden afternoon light. The furniture was modern but comfortable, soft grays and creams, nothing ostentatious but everything quality. A full kitchen with appliances that gleamed. 2 bedrooms, one of which was clearly meant to become a nursery, though it stood empty now, waiting. Mr. Castellano had it cleaned and stocked, Antonio explained, showing me the refrigerator full of food, the bathroom with products I'd never heard of, but that probably cost more than my monthly salary. There's a panic button in every room, red, mounted on the wall. You press it, we come. Immediately, I nodded mutely, overwhelmed. This couldn't be real. 24 hours ago, I'd been scrubbing toilets and hiding pregnancy tests. Now I was standing in luxury I'd only seen in movies, under the protection of a man whose name made hardened criminals flinch. Someone will be posted in the hallway at all times, Antonio continued. Discreet. You won't see them unless there's trouble. Mr. Castellano wants you comfortable, not imprisoned. Comfortable. Imprisoned. The words felt interchangeable. After Antonio left, I stood in the silence of my new cage and let myself fall apart. I cried until my throat hurt, until my eyes burned, until the impossible reality of my situation finally felt real. Then I washed my face in the obscenely luxurious bathroom, looked at my blotchy reflection, and made myself a promise I would survive this. For my baby, I would survive anything. The next 3 days passed in a strange blur of adjustment. Marco had arranged for me to take a leave of absence from the restaurant. Paid, somehow, though I suspected the money came from him rather than my actual employer. A doctor came to the apartment, a woman with kind eyes who examined me thoroughly, prescribed prenatal vitamins, and assured me the baby was healthy despite my poor nutrition. You're about 14 weeks, she said gently, the ultrasound wand moving across my barely there belly. See? Right there. Strong heartbeat. I stared at the screen, at the tiny bean-shaped life inside me, and felt something crack open in my chest. Love. Terror. Fierce, protective determination. This was real. This baby was real, and I would do whatever it took to keep them safe. Marco visited on the 4th day. I heard the knock and opened the door to find him standing in the hallway, dressed in another immaculate suit, his presence filling the space like gathering storm clouds. Behind him, I glimpsed Antonio and another guard whose name I didn't know. May I come in? He asked, and the politeness felt jarring. This man could probably buy the entire building with pocket change, and he was asking permission to enter an apartment he owned. Of course. I stepped back, suddenly aware of how I looked, yoga pants and an oversized t-shirt, hair in a messy bun, no makeup. Not exactly the polished companion he'd probably expected. If he noticed, he didn't comment. He moved into the living room with that fluid grace, his eyes scanning the space like he was cataloging every detail. You're settling in? Yes, thank you. It's more than I could have imagined. Good. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket, extending it toward me. Your new identification, credit cards, a phone. I took the envelope with trembling fingers, opening it to find a sleek smartphone, several black credit cards with my name embossed in silver, and a driver's license that looked exactly like my old one, except for the address, now listed as this building. The credit cards have no limit, Marco said casually, as if this were normal. Use them for whatever you need. Clothes, food, furnishings for the nursery, anything. I can't possibly. You can, and you will. That commanding tone again, the one that made arguing feel impossible. Tomorrow night, we have our first public appearance, dinner at Aurelio's. It's a restaurant where certain people gather. You'll need appropriate clothing. My stomach dropped. Tomorrow? The sooner we establish your connection to me, the safer you are. Word travels fast in my world. By Monday, everyone who matters will know you're under my protection. His eyes softened fractionally. I know this is overwhelming, but it's necessary. I clutched the envelope like a lifeline. What should I wear? I don't know how to... I've never been to places like that. There's a boutique on 5th Avenue, Valentina's. I've arranged for them to expect you this afternoon. Antonio will drive you. He paused, studying my face. They'll take care of everything. Trust me. Trust him. The man who'd killed my baby's father. The man who held my life in his hands like a chess piece. The man who was offering protection that felt increasingly like possession. But when he looked at me with those dark, intense eyes, when his voice dropped to something almost gentle, I felt myself wanting to trust him, wanting to believe this was more than just a business arrangement. "Okay," I whispered. "I'll go." Something flickered across his face. Approval, perhaps, or satisfaction. He moved closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, feel the heat radiating from his body. His hand reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and settled on my shoulder. The touch was warm, possessive, electrifying. "You're doing well, Emily," he said softly. "I know this isn't easy, but you're safe now. I promise you that." Then he was gone, leaving me standing in the middle of my golden cage, his touch still burning on my shoulder, my heart racing in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Valentina's boutique was everything I expected, and more. All marble floors and crystal chandeliers, with dresses that probably cost more than I'd earned in 6 months. The owner, an elegant woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a warm smile, greeted me like I was royalty rather than an imposter playing dress-up. "Miss Bennett, Mr. Castellano called ahead. We're honored to serve you." She took my arm, guiding me deeper into the store. "He mentioned you need something for Aurelio's. Classic, elegant, but not too formal. Am I correct?" I nodded, mute, as she pulled dresses from racks like she could see inside my head. Black, navy, deep emerald green. Fabrics that felt like water against my fingers. She led me to a private fitting room larger than the bathroom I'd shared with Jessica, and for the next hour, I tried on gowns that transformed me into someone I didn't recognize. The dress we finally chose was midnight blue, simple but elegant, with a neckline that was modest but flattering, and fabric that skimmed over my barely there bump without clinging. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone who could belong in Marco's world, someone who looked like she deserved to be protected by a man like him. "Perfect," Valentina declared. "Shoes, jewelry, a wrap for the evening. We'll have everything sent to your address." "How much?" I started to ask, but she waved a hand dismissively. "Already arranged, my dear. Mr. Castellano takes excellent care of his companions." The slight pause before that last word suggested she knew exactly what I was. Not a girlfriend, not really, but something more complicated and dangerous. The next evening, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, barely recognizing myself. The dress fit perfectly. A stylist Valentina had sent over had done my hair in soft waves, my makeup subtle but polished. Diamond earrings, borrowed, the stylist assured me, though they felt real enough to burn, glinted at my ears. I looked like someone who belonged in Marco Castellano's world. I looked like a lie. The knock came at exactly 7. I opened the door to find Marco standing there, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than a car, his hair styled back, his presence overwhelming, but it was the way he looked at me, dark eyes traveling from my face down to my heels and back up, something heated and possessive in that gaze that made my breath catch. "Beautiful," he said quietly. Not, "You look beautiful," but just that single word, like an undeniable fact. "Thank you." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "You clean up pretty well yourself." Something like amusement flickered across his face. He offered his arm, and I took it, feeling the solid muscle beneath the expensive fabric. As we walked to the elevator, I was hyper-aware of his guard following at a discreet distance, of the way Marco's hand covered mine on his arm, proprietary and warm. The restaurant was exactly what I'd imagined. Old-world elegance, dim lighting, tables spaced far enough apart for private conversations. The maitre d' greeted Marco with barely concealed nervousness, leading us to a table in the back corner where Marco could sit with his back to the wall, his eyes on every entrance and exit. I felt the stares as we walked through the dining room. Curious, assessing, dangerous. These weren't normal, wealthy New Yorkers out for dinner. These were people from Marco's world, and I could feel them cataloging my presence, drawing conclusions, spreading information that would ripple through the underground by morning. Marco pulled out my chair, an unexpectedly gentlemanly gesture, and settled across from me, his attention never leaving my face. "Nervous?" "Terrified," I admitted. good. Fear keeps you sharp. He signaled a waiter, ordered wine for himself and sparkling water for me without asking what I wanted. But you're safe here. No one will touch you. Because I'm yours, I said, the words tasting strange in my mouth. Because you're mine, he confirmed. And the way he said it, dark and certain and utterly possessive, sent a shiver down my spine that wasn't entirely from fear. Dinner passed in a blur of exquisite food I could barely taste, and conversation that felt like a carefully choreographed dance. Marco asked about my life before, where I'd grown up, what I'd studied, how I'd ended up in New York. I answered carefully, editing out the desperate loneliness, the crushing poverty, the nights I'd cried myself to sleep, wondering if I'd survive this city. And he listened. Really listened, his dark eyes never leaving my face, like every word I spoke mattered. Like I mattered. Halfway through the meal, a man approached our table, tall, silver-haired, with eyes like flint and a smile that never reached them. Marco's entire demeanor shifted. The warmth disappeared, replaced by cold calculation. Castellano, the man said in accented English. I heard rumors you'd taken a companion, wanted to see for myself. Vitale. Marco's voice could have cut glass. How considerate, Emily. This is Lorenzo Vitale, an associate. The name hit me like ice water. Vitale. The family Marco had warned me about. The ones who'd hunt Jake's debts. The ones who'd kill me and my baby if they knew. Lorenzo's eyes slid to me, assessing and cold. Charming. Tell me. Miss Bennett, I managed, my voice stronger than I felt. Emily Bennett. Bennett. He repeated the name like he was filing it away. And how did you meet our Marco? Marco's hand shot across the table, covering mine in a grip that was both protective and warning. That's enough, Lorenzo. The lady is off limits, to everyone. Something dangerous flashed between the two men. A silent war of wills I couldn't fully understand. Then Lorenzo smiled again, that cold, empty expression. Of course. My apologies. Enjoy your evening. He walked away, but I felt his eyes on us for the rest of the meal, calculating, threatening. Marco's hand remained on mine, his thumb tracing small circles on my wrist that should have been comforting, but instead felt like branding. He knows. I whispered. He suspects. There's a difference. Marco's eyes were hard, dangerous. But after tonight, it won't matter. You're established, protected, mine. That word again. Mine. It should have terrified me. Instead, sitting in that dangerous restaurant with Marco's hand on mine and enemies circling like sharks, I felt something I hadn't expected. I felt safe. The headlines started appearing within 48 hours. Not in mainstream media. Marco's world operated in shadows too deep for regular press. But in the underground channels, the whispered conversations, the knowing looks from people who trafficked in information darker than news, Castellano's new woman, the mystery girl under his protection. Who is Emily Bennett? I learned about my new notoriety from Marco himself, who arrived at my apartment 3 days after our dinner at Aurelio's with a tablet showing surveillance photos someone had taken of us. Me in my blue dress, his hand possessive on my back. Me laughing at something he'd said, looking far more comfortable than I'd felt. Me looking at him with an expression I hadn't realized I'd worn, something soft, almost trusting. This is good, Marco said, scrolling through the images with professional detachment. The narrative is spreading. You're established as mine. The Vitales won't move against you now. It would be suicide. I stared at the photos, at this version of myself I barely recognized. So I'm safe? The baby's safe? Safer. His eyes met mine, dark and serious. In my world, there's no such thing as completely safe, but you're as protected as anyone can be. The honesty should have frightened me. Instead, I appreciated it. Marco didn't lie, didn't sugarcoat, didn't pretend our situation was anything other than what it was. A dangerous game with life or death stakes. What happens now? I asked. Now you live your life. The doctor will visit weekly. You have security, resources, everything you need. He paused, something shifting in his expression. And I'd like you to have dinner with me. Not for show, not for appearances. Just dinner. The request caught me off guard. Why? Because I want to know you. He said it simply, like it was the most natural thing in the world. You're living in my building, under my protection, carrying a child I've taken responsibility for. I'd like to understand who you are beyond the terrified girl I found cleaning a bathroom. Something warm and dangerous bloomed in my chest. Okay. When? Tonight. My place. 7 o'clock. He left before I could respond, and I spent the rest of the day in a state of nervous anticipation that felt disturbingly like excitement. This was different from Aurelio's. This wasn't for show. Wasn't about establishing dominance or protection. This was Marco Castellano asking to spend time with me because he wanted to. The thought terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. I dressed carefully. Not the designer gown from Valentina's, but nice jeans and a soft cashmere sweater I'd bought with one of Marco's credit cards, still feeling guilty about the price tag. My bump was more visible now at 15 weeks. A small swell I could no longer hide completely. Antonio escorted me up to the penthouse at exactly 7. Marco answered the door himself, and I nearly stumbled at the sight of him. No suit this time. Just dark jeans and a gray Henley that clung to his frame, his sleeves pushed up to reveal those scarred forearms. His hair was slightly mussed, like he'd been running his hands through it, and he looked more human than I'd ever seen him. Emily. He stepped back, letting me enter. Come in. The penthouse looked different than during my first visit. Warmer somehow. Music played softly, something classical I didn't recognize. And the dining table was set for 2, candles flickering, wine glasses waiting. You cooked? I asked, unable to hide my surprise. Don't sound so shocked. A hint of amusement colored his voice. I'm not completely useless in a kitchen. My mother made sure all her children knew how to feed themselves. The mention of his mother surprised me. Marco rarely spoke about his family, keeping his past locked away as tightly as his business dealings. Is she still alive? Yes, in Italy. She refuses to come to America, says it's too violent, too chaotic. His expression softened. She's probably right. He guided me to the table, pulling out my chair with that same unexpected gentlemanliness. The food was simple but perfect. Pasta with a sauce that smelled like heaven, fresh bread, a salad with vegetables I could actually stomach. He'd even made ginger tea without me asking, remembering my nausea. This is incredible, I said after the first bite, and I meant it. Where did you learn to cook like this? My grandmother. She believed a man who couldn't feed himself and his family was useless. He poured himself wine, water for me. She was a formidable woman. You would have liked her. We ate in comfortable silence for a while, and I found myself relaxing in a way I hadn't since this whole nightmare began. Here, in the soft candlelight of his home, Marco didn't feel like a dangerous mafia boss. He felt like a man, complicated, guarded, but somehow safe. Tell me about your parents, he said eventually. You mentioned they died. How old were you? The old pain surfaced, duller now but still present. 19, car accident. A drunk driver crossed the center line on their way home from my college orientation. I pushed pasta around my plate. One moment I had a family, a future, everything planned out. The next, I had nothing but debt and grief. Marco's jaw tightened. No other family, none that mattered. Some distant cousins I'd met maybe twice. My parents were only children, my grandparents all gone. I met his eyes. I've been alone for a long time, Marco. I'm used to it. You're not alone anymore. He said it with such certainty, such absolute conviction, that something in me wanted desperately to believe him. Aren't I? The question came out more vulnerable than I'd intended. You're protecting me, providing for me, but that's not the same as not being alone. That's just being a kept prisoner in a nicer cage. Marco set down his fork, his full attention on me. Is that what you think this is? A cage? Isn't it? I challenged. I can't leave without guards. I can't make decisions without considering how they affect your protection. I'm living a life that isn't mine, pretending to be someone I'm not, all because I made the mistake of trusting the wrong man. Jake was a bastard who used you. Marco's voice went hard. But you didn't make a mistake, Emily. You wanted connection, love, something to make you feel less alone. That's not a mistake. That's being human. Tears pricked my eyes, and now I'm trapped. You're protected. He stood, moving around the table with that predatory grace. He crouched beside my chair, bringing himself to my eye level, his hand reaching out to cover mine. I know the difference feels small from where you're sitting, but you're alive, Emily. Your baby's alive. In a month, the Vitalis would have found you, and you'd both be dead. This isn't a cage. It's survival. His hand was warm on mine, calloused and strong. I looked into those dark eyes and saw something I hadn't expected. Genuine concern, mixed with something darker, more possessive. Something that made my breath catch. "Why do you care?" I whispered. "Really? Not the story about your brother and the baby you couldn't find. Why do you actually care what happens to me?" Marco was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on my wrist, because when I walked into that bathroom and saw you, exhausted, terrified, barely holding yourself together, I saw someone who'd been failed by everyone who should have protected them. And I have the power to change that, to make sure you're not alone anymore. His eyes held mine. I don't know how to explain it better than that. "That sounds like a savior complex," I said, but my voice shook. "Maybe it is." He didn't look away. "Does that make it wrong?" I thought about Jessica's couch, about scrubbing toilets for minimum wage, about the terror of discovering I was pregnant with nowhere to go and no one to help. I thought about Lorenzo Vitale's cold eyes and the death sentence I hadn't known I was living under. And I thought about this man, dangerous, powerful, terrifying, who'd given me safety, comfort, and something that felt dangerously close to care. "No," I whispered. "It doesn't make it wrong." Something shifted in Marco's expression. Relief, heat, possession. His hand moved from my wrist to my face, cupping my cheek with surprising gentleness. His thumb traced my cheekbone, and I felt my breath stutter in response. "I want to kiss you," he said quietly, giving me the choice. "Tell me no if that's not what you want." I should have said no. Should have maintained boundaries, kept this arrangement professional, protected what was left of my heart. But sitting there in the candlelight, his hand warm on my face, his eyes dark with want, I couldn't remember why those things mattered. "Yes," I breathed. He leaned in slowly, giving me every chance to change my mind. His lips brushed mine softly at first. A question, a test. Then deeper, one hand sliding into my hair, the other settling on my waist just above where my baby grew. The kiss was nothing like I'd expected, not rough or demanding, but thorough, claiming, absolutely devastating. When he pulled back, I was breathless, trembling, completely undone. "Emily." My name on his lips sounded like a prayer and a possession. "You're not just under my protection anymore. You understand that, don't you?" I did. Somewhere between the bathroom at Romano's and this moment, between terror and trust, between survival and something far more dangerous, I'd stopped being just a responsibility. I'd become his. "I understand," I whispered. Marco pulled me to my feet, drawing me against his chest. I could feel his heartbeat, strong and steady, an anchor in the storm of everything I felt. His arms wrapped around me, one hand splaying possessively over my small bump. "Mine," he murmured against my hair. "You and this baby. Mine to protect. Mine to care for. Mine." I should have been frightened by the possessiveness in his voice, the absolute claim he was making. Instead, I felt safe in a way I hadn't since my parents died, like I'd finally found someone who wouldn't leave, wouldn't abandon me, wouldn't let me fall, even if that someone was a monster wearing a man's face. "Yours," I agreed, and sealed both our fates with that single word. We stood there in the candlelight, wrapped in each other, while the city glittered outside the windows like a field of broken stars. And for the first time since taking that pregnancy test, I felt something besides fear. I felt hope. Dangerous, foolish, impossible hope. The weeks that followed blurred together in a strange mix of domesticity and danger that became my new normal. Marco visited almost every evening, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just to sit with me while I read or watch television. His presence a constant grounding force. He'd work on his laptop, making calls in rapid Italian, while I curled up on the couch with prenatal books, and somehow it felt right. Like we were building something real from the wreckage of how we'd met. My body changed. The bump grew more pronounced, unmistakable now at 20 weeks. The nausea finally faded, replaced by an appetite that made Marco smile with satisfaction every time he watched me eat. He was obsessive about my health. The doctor visited weekly, nutritionists planned my meals, and he personally ensured I took every vitamin, attended every appointment. "It's too much," I protested one evening when he arrived with yet another specialist, this one to discuss nursery design. "It's not enough," he countered, his hand settling possessively on my growing stomach. "Nothing is too much for you, for this baby." The possessiveness should have suffocated me. Instead, it made me feel cherished in a way I'd never experienced. Marco didn't just protect me, he consumed me, his attention absolute and unwavering. He knew my schedule better than I did, appeared whenever I needed something before I could ask. And God help anyone who looked at me the wrong way. I learned this firsthand when we went shopping for nursery furniture. A salesman had been overly friendly, touching my arm while showing me cribs, and Marco's entire demeanor had shifted into something lethal. He'd simply stepped between us, his presence radiating such danger that the man had literally backed away, stammering apologies. "He was just being nice," I'd said afterward. But Marco's jaw had remained tight. He was touching what's mine. There's a difference. The jealousy should have been a red flag. Instead, it made me feel wanted, protected, valued. I was falling for him, had probably been falling since that first kiss, and the realization terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. At 22 weeks, the doctor told us the baby's gender, a girl. I was having a daughter. Marco's reaction was visceral. His hand tightened on mine, his eyes going suspiciously bright. That night, he held me on his penthouse couch, his hand on my stomach, and spoke in Italian, soft words I didn't understand, but felt in my bones. Promises, I thought. Vows to protect this tiny girl who would be born into his dangerous world. "I want to name her Sophia," he said quietly, "after my grandmother, if that's acceptable to you." The request surprised me. "This isn't your baby, Marco, not biologically." His eyes met mine, fierce and certain. "She's mine in every way that matters. I'll raise her, protect her, love her as my own. Biology means nothing. Choice means everything." His hand pressed more firmly against my stomach. "So I'm asking, will you let me give her my grandmother's name?" Tears streamed down my face. "Yes, Sophia. It's perfect." He kissed me then, deep and claiming, and I felt the last of my resistance crumble. I was his, completely, irrevocably his. And our daughter would be too. But peace in Marco's world was always temporary. It happened on a cold November evening when I was 25 weeks pregnant. I'd been at a prenatal yoga class, one of the few activities Marco allowed without him present, though Antonio and 2 other guards waited outside. The class had run late, and I'd lingered to talk with the instructor about exercises for back pain. We were walking to the car when I noticed Antonio's tension, the way his hand moved toward his jacket. Then I heard it, the screech of tires, shouting in Italian, and Antonio's sharp command, "Get down!" He threw me behind the car as gunshots exploded through the evening air. I hit the pavement hard, my hands instinctively covering my stomach, terror whiting out rational thought. More shots, screaming, the metallic smell of blood. Then silence, broken only by my ragged breathing and the sound of cars speeding away. Antonio hauled me up, blood streaming from a wound on his shoulder. In the car. Now. The drive back was a blur, Antonio on his phone speaking rapid Italian, other cars appearing to surround us, and me shaking so hard I couldn't form words. My hands wouldn't leave my stomach, checking obsessively for pain, for blood, for any sign that my baby had been hurt. We didn't go to my apartment. Antonio drove straight to Marco's penthouse, and the moment the elevator doors opened, Marco was there. I'd never seen him look like that, white-faced, his control shattered, something raw and desperate in his eyes. "Emily." He reached for me, his hands running over my body, checking for injuries. "Are you hurt? The baby?" "I don't know." My voice broke. "Marco, I don't know." The doctor was already there, equipment set up in Marco's living room. She examined me thoroughly while Marco paced like a caged animal, barking orders into his phone in Italian that sounded like death sentences. The guards who'd been with me stood at attention, Antonio getting his shoulder bandaged while reporting what had happened. "The baby's fine," the doctor finally announced. "Heart rate is strong, no signs of distress. You're both incredibly lucky." The relief nearly brought me to my knees. Marco caught me, pulling me against his chest so tightly I could barely breathe. I felt him trembling, felt the absolute terror he'd been holding back, and understood with crystalline clarity what I'd become to him. Not just a responsibility, not just someone under his protection. I was his weakness. After the doctor left, Marco carried me to his bedroom, a space I'd never entered before. He set me on the massive bed and sat beside me, his hands framing my face with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the violence burning in his eyes. "Who was it?" I whispered. "The Vitales." His voice was flat, cold, absolutely lethal. "They've been testing boundaries for weeks, but this..." His jaw clenched. This was a declaration of war, because of me. Guilt crashed over me. "This is my fault." "No." The word cracked like a whip. "This is their fault for thinking they could touch what's mine and live. This is Jake's fault for stealing from them and leaving you exposed. This is every bastard's fault except yours." His thumb traced my cheekbone. "You did nothing wrong, Emily. You're the victim here. People are going to die. I knew it with certainty. Because of me. Because of Sophia. People were always going to die." Marco's honesty was brutal. "That's the world I live in. But now they'll die knowing what happens when you threaten my family. His family." He'd said it so casually, but the words hit me like a freight train. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped being just a protected asset and become something infinitely more dangerous. I'd become the family of a man who would burn the world to keep me safe. "I'm scared," I admitted. "I know." He pulled me against him, my head on his chest, his arms wrapped protectively around me and our daughter. "But I promise you this, no one will ever get close enough to hurt you again. I'll destroy anyone who tries." I believed him. God help me. I believed every word. Marco kept me in his penthouse for 3 days, refusing to let me out of his sight. I slept in his bed, ate meals he personally prepared, and listened to him conduct business from his office in English now, so I could understand. Companies were being bought and sold, alliances were shifting, and people were disappearing. I didn't ask where, but I could guess. The Vitale family was being systematically dismantled. On the 4th day, Marco came to me with a small box. We were sitting on his couch, my feet in his lap while he absently massaged them, a habit he'd developed, claiming it helped with pregnancy swelling. "I have something for you," he said, his voice carrying an edge of nervousness I'd never heard before. He opened the box to reveal a ring, a stunning emerald surrounded by diamonds, clearly antique, clearly priceless. My breath caught. "This was my grandmother's," Marco said quietly, "Sophia's namesake. She wore it for 60 years of marriage to my grandfather, through wars and poverty and everything life threw at them." He took the ring from the box, holding it up to the light. "I want you to have it. Marco, I know this isn't a normal relationship. I know we started in the worst possible way, but somewhere between protecting you and knowing you, I fell in love with you, Emily." His eyes met mine, vulnerable and fierce. "I love your strength, your resilience, the way you've survived everything life has thrown at you. I love how you talk to Sophia even though she can't hear you yet. I love that you make me want to be better than what I am." Tears streamed down my face. "You're proposing? I'm claiming you. Officially, legally, permanently." He took my left hand, the ring poised over my finger. "Marry me, Emily. Let me give you and Sophia my name, my protection, my everything. Let me be your family." I thought about the girl I'd been 6 months ago. Alone, desperate, invisible. I thought about the man who'd found me at my lowest point and built me back up. Not into who I was, but into who I could be. I thought about the dangerous, consuming, utterly devastating love I felt for this complicated, violent, protective man. "Yes," I whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. He slid the ring onto my finger, and it fit perfectly. Then he kissed me with a passion that stole my breath, his hands cradling my face like I was precious, breakable, infinitely valuable. Mine, he murmured against my lips. Forever. Forever, I agreed. We married 2 weeks later in a private ceremony at his family's estate in upstate New York. His mother flew in from Italy, a tiny, fierce woman who took one look at my pregnant belly and Marco's protective stance and smiled knowingly. His sisters surrounded me with warmth and acceptance, welcoming me into a family I'd never expected to have. I wore white, a simple dress that accommodated my 7-month belly, and Marco wore a black suit that made him look like the prince from a dark fairy tale. When he slid his grandmother's wedding band onto my finger to join her engagement ring, when he promised to love and protect me until death, I knew he meant every word. I love you, I whispered during our first dance, Sophia kicking actively between us. I love you both, he replied, his hand on my stomach. My wife, my daughter, my family. 3 months later, Sophia was born. 8 pounds, 2 ounces, with dark hair and her father's, Marco's, intense eyes. He held her with such reverence, such absolute love, that I fell for him all over again. She wasn't his blood, but she was his in every way that mattered. Hello, little one, he murmured, his finger stroking her tiny cheek. I'm your papa, and I promise you'll never know fear, never know hunger, never know what it's like to be unprotected. You're mine, Sofia Castellano, and I protect what's mine. Watching him with our daughter, I understood something fundamental. Marco Castellano was a dangerous man. A man who'd built an empire on violence and fear, but he was also the man who'd saved me, loved me, given me a family when I had nothing. He was mine. I was his. And Sophia was ours, and I wouldn't change a single moment of how we'd found each other, even knowing the darkness that had brought us together, because sometimes salvation comes wrapped in danger, and love grows in the most impossible places. Sometimes the monster becomes the hero, and sometimes the girl who had nothing finds everything she never knew she needed.